Thank you. Mr. Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Desai, I join, I know, a number of my colleagues expressing some concerns on this issue. In particular, I'm concerned about the effect on PEG channels in my area. As in many other areas of the country, my constituents rely on local PEG channels for information about local issues, local church services, city council meetings, even information on what their congressman is doing in Washington. These are services that are important to those who watch them, and they provide a lot of necessary information. As you know, California recently enacted a law that allows statewide franchising agreements. While competition in the cable market will benefit not only consumers but PEG channels as well, I'm concerned that new providers no longer have the incentive, as they did with citywide franchising agreements, to continue offering the same PEG access if they decide to offer it at all. I have a couple questions. One, in your testimony you expressed concern about practices that move PEG channels to a digital tier or treat them as on-demand channels. And I wanted to ask you what action the FCC is taking to ensure that PEG channels are accessible to all cable customers. But I want to mention one other question as well, and that is California franchise regulations require new entrants to treat PEG channels the same as incumbent cable providers do. But there's a concern that certain new providers are not meeting those requirements by offering PEG channels at lower quality resolutions, not offering closed captioning, not putting PEG channels on the scrolling TV guide, and making it difficult and time-consuming to access PEG channels. Since many believe there are inadequate enforcement mechanisms in the California statute, local cities interested in protecting PEG access for their citizens may have little recourse aside from civil action to ensure that PEG channels are accessible. So I'd also like to ask you what tools the FCC has at its disposal to ensure that companies are complying with their franchise agreements, and what advice you'd have for local communities struggling with issues of noncompliance.
Sure. Once we have a formal complaint in front of us, the staff would be able to evaluate that complaint and bring it up to the full commission to evaluate. We actually don't have something in front of us right now that we can act on. So, I can tell you that my view is those practices would violate just the straight terms of the statute. But, and I should also clarify that I'm speaking as the chief of the Media Bureau. I don't have authority to speak for all the members of the commission. But I can tell you that if we have, what the normal process is, if we have a formal complaint filed before us, we evaluate it and then give our recommendation working with the Enforcement Bureau, and that would go to the full commission to decide. But we need something to act on.
So it would be your opinion, though, that putting the PEG channels in like combine them all on one channel and making you go through a menu to find them, basically making them more inaccessible than other channels, you think would violate the statute?
Right. The statute requires PEG channels to be placed on the basic service tier along with your local broadcast channels. So to place additional burdens on consumers to have to find their PEG channels seems to defeat the purpose of the basic service tier.
But unless someone files a formal complaint, the FCC can't take action?
There's nothing specific in front of us that we can act on. There's no petition for a declaratory ruling. There's not an actual formal complaint filed on the issue.
I would think that, yes.
Prior to you arriving, Mr. Kirk had gotten two of these folks already to start writing their complaint out.
Okay. Very good. I'm surprised that it really requires that. I mean, I would think if you have an oversight responsibility in this area and you see major companies who are not complying with the statute, that you have the authority on your own to take action to communicate with the companies that this does not meet the requirements of the statute. If the companies still fail to take action, I would think on your own authority you'd have the action to step forward. I mean, it may help as a practical matter to have a private party or other party, municipality, file a formal complaint, but I shouldn't think that's necessary. What is it about the statute, your own governing authority, that makes you think you need a complaint to take action?
I'm not sure what's in the statute, but generally, the practice is we take a specific issue that's been brought to us, that's in front of us, in a formal way, and then we evaluate that issue and bring it before the commissioners. That I can tell you from personal experience. I can get back to you on the statutory or legal authority, issue if that's right. But I think I can tell you from personal experience when there are times when we've brought issues. If we've brought an issue in front of the commissioners, sometimes the question is asked, well, why are you bringing this issue to us? Why are you bringing, no one's complained to me about this issue. If no one's filed on this issue, why are you, there's so many issues to work on. Why aren't you working on the ones where people have actually, filed something formal? But I mean, the general practice is that there's something specific to act on. Like, actually, we spoke with the Alliance for Community Media, about this issue as well when they brought it to our attention last year when the issue came up in Michigan. And Barbara can speak to that probably more fully. But we did explain that it would be helpful to have a formal complaint so that we can actually, in a formal vehicle, bring this issue to the through the commission or through the Enforcement Bureau to act on.
Do you also believe that the failure to provide the closed captioning, as is the situation with the AT&T UVerse PEG product, also would depart from the statutory requirements?
I'd have to look at the closed captioning rules specifically to see if if there would be a violation. But it appears that. It depending on also, there's some situations where there are exemptions to the closed captioning rule, and I just don't know offhand whether they're applicable. But generally, the closed captioning rules, I would think would apply.
So, as a general rule, if a provider is providing closed captioning on all the other channels, but not providing on PEG channels, they're not permitted to give discrepant treatment to the PEG channels?
Well, there are definitely pass-through requirements. I don't remember the details of them offhand, but if the PEG channel is captioning its programming, generally that captioning needs to be passed through, I believe. Yeah, I believe that's what the rule is, yeah.
I thank the Chairman.
Thank you.
You're back.
Thank you. I must say that when I was a ranking member on the Commerce Justice State, the FCC was under our jurisdiction. That whole issue came up, and it always troubled me. I asked the FCC. At that time, I was spending a lot of time defending Howard Stern's right to say whatever he wanted, and he was getting fined every other day. And I said, why? I understand some people find his locker room humor offensive, but, I find Rush Limbaugh blaming minorities for everything that's wrong with the country more offensive. I won't complain about it. But why are you investigating him? And the answer was the one that was always shocking and still is today. People complain about Stern. People did not complain about Rush Limbaugh. So it would seem to me that the FCC has to really consider at some time enforcing laws that exist and not necessarily waiting for someone to complain, because you do have in this country more organized folks that can complain on some issues and others that will not.